everyone. My name is Cat Oriel with Forbes Breaking News, and today I'm here with Vermont State Rep Monique Priestley. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kat.
Of course. So you're working on a bill that would create the nation's first liability standards for companies developing potentially dangerous AI products. So talk to me about your legislation, why it's important, and specifically the dangers you're trying to address.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. This bill aims to really put some guardrails in place for artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is in like every product that we're like using on the internet nowadays, there is nothing in place to keep it from making sure that it's not using deception or creating harms. And so this bill puts in place kind of a mechanism to have consequences for systems that cause harm.
What are the consequences?
So the consequences are basically the same as like product liability law. So it puts in place fines and things like that.
So what industry standard are you going towards? Because I know social media platforms, they already don't face a lot of liability, especially under Section 230. So are you sort of afraid that maybe AI one day could qualify under Section 230 and those platforms aren't going to be liable? So is that the rationale behind your legislation?
I would say so. As far as like the state of Vermont, like we have consumer protection laws and product liability laws, and we don't have anything in place yet in Vermont.
And so when we talk about potentially dangerous and like inherently dangerous, when you talk about the standards that you want to hold these companies toward, what does that mean? Like, what is that metric? Because it sounds a little subjective. So what are you aiming at there?
So I mean, things like we've already been seeing in the news, like deepfakes used in elections and things like that, and then also the ability for people to use these products for things like, examples of being able to look for vulnerabilities in like the power grid and be able to like take advantage of those types of things. We're also looking at things like the use of AI in medical products or vehicles. And so all of these like kind of the high risk situations.
I think a lot of big questions, you mentioned deepfakes, there's a lot of buzz around that, a lot of people scared about what that might mean. I think one of the biggest questions that people find about simulated images and whether or not they're illegal, especially when it comes to unconsensual pornography and the First Amendment, laws around that. So if we could go into a hypothetical maybe around your legislation, of course, going to current events, I was seeing talks about, the horrible deepfakes going around about Taylor Swift, for example. So your legislation, would it have prevented this or held the company responsible for the AI that created the technology to use for that, or would it be holding the people that actually use that tool accountable?
Right. So it is definitely the developers of the products kind of as a base level of like not having safeguards in place in that product so that people can use it to create that kind of thing. And then also say there's also kind of a middle ground here so that if someone takes like an open source solution and then removes safeguards that are in place, then they could also be liable. But it's meant to protect like business owners, people who are using these systems and then inadvertently like are creating, causing harm, and they might not actually even know it. Like things like the copyright infringement and things like that, or use of like getting at that kind of thing that they might, I guess puts in barriers in place to protect people from doing things that they, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like your legislation is really trying to get at the root. And I think there's a lot of debate of like looking at technology just as like a neutral tool and recognizing, like there are people behind the scenes and the technology actually doing the harmful acts. So like, where do you think the responsibility falls between like the people actually causing the harm and the products themselves?
Right. So in this legislation, it is putting that kind of onus on the creators of that product and the code itself.
You've also mentioned the dangers of AI surrounding politics and the election. We're entering an election year. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, what is the importance of working with this issue, especially heading into an election year?
Yeah, so I mean, we're already seeing our neighbors right to the east, New Hampshire. People were receiving robocalls related to the election already, and so that this bill has a piece that's like if a product kind of enables people to be able to create um, the information and things like that that then are used as a deception and disinformation in elections.
Would you say that you find AI misuse is affecting the private or public sector more?
I mean, I think yes. I think all of it. I think the thing that we're seeing is like so think about even just like social media. So we were thinking it's great. We're using it for decades, and then we get to a point where we're realizing like it has led to a mental health crisis, especially in like kids and things like that. So we're trying to be proactive here instead of reactionary in a way that we kind of let like the tech around like social media get away from us. So both protecting businesses that are like using kind of off the shelf AI products and then also the consumers who are picking up these products, using them without really thinking about the risks. So we want to provide some safety there for them. Yeah.
And do you think that there should be more federal action taken on AI? I mean, you're working on it on a state level, so like what is the importance of working at this on a state level, but also, the pitfalls of like many different states trying to do it in a sort of piecemeal way. How should Congress or the White House be looking at this?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they would just take up our bill as a great starting point. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing this. Like, I'm working through data privacy right now on our committee, and it's the same kind of situation where the federal government has not got its act together as far as like putting a general guideline in place, which both puts consumers at risk, but it also puts the businesses that are trying to comply with a network of different expectations across the country at risk as well. And so with AI, definitely like there needs to be federal legislation for sure. But in the absence of that, like states do need to take action to protect their citizens.
Yeah, so you are trying to work with Congress for them to, take some piece of your legislation and make it a federal law?
I think definitely. So I'm working with the Center for Humane Technology, and so they are kind of in Capitol Hill trying to navigate that. But in the meantime, the thing that I'm doing with bills like this, bills like data privacy, is collaborate with other states and compare notes on different legislation, and really talk to each other and say like, this is what we're seeing in our state. These are the questions or the concerns that people have, and then just comparing notes to try to get things passed
Yeah.
across different
What
states.
states are you working with right now?
Yeah. So for this, actually for this one, looking at South Carolina, but and for other like there's other bills that I'm working on with like Connecticut and Virginia, but mainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that there's any state, some of the ones that you just listed, or any state in the country where you're like they are kind of the gold standard right now?
Right now, I feel like we're we're that gold standard. So yeah.
Okay. What makes Vermont? I mean, there's this piece of legislation, but, and also I do want to hear about the legislation, very similarly that you're also putting forward around like protecting kids from, the dangers of AI and social media. Would you say it's because of this bill or like the other bill or any other bill, that you're pushing through? What makes Vermont like the gold standard right now, you think?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, like Vermont is I get a lot of like, why Vermont? And like the more I think about this, like, it makes a lot of sense. Like we were the first state in the country to develop an AI council, and to also have a director of AI. So there's always been kind of like thought there, and then we're just like building off of that. Yeah, and I would say, in general, um, it's been really great. Like we're very accessible. So like like I can have conversations both with other states, but also like advocates and businesses that are in the building, and we can talk through legislation in a very quick way.
And now talk to me about your legislation, the Vermont Kids Code, I believe it's called. So yeah, talk to me about what you're doing to sort of protect children from social media and AI and the dangers around it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so the kids code, and so this is taking notes from California and the UK, but then also kind of adapting to some of the concerns that have been raised around First Amendment rights and age verification processes and things like that. But really going after not the content of social media, but the design of the products that are being presented to kids, trying to avoid things, trying to do things like privacy by default, like privacy settings on by default, and really having people take a second to like if they're gonna adjust those privacy settings, then they've thought about it and it's not like a manipulated thing for them to start from. And then also just the way that the product has a user use it, so like scrolling forever or manipulation of basically addictive features.
Mhm. So my final question for you today is just what do you think it's going to take for the U.S. to wake up and take action on it? And do you think it's going to take like a huge wake up call, something on a larger scale to occur for real action to happen?
I mean, I really hope not. I really hope that they start catching on, and also that states are talking to each other and collaborating. Because I guess my concern with the wake up call would be that it would be a massive harm to many people, like we were seeing with social media over time with kids. We don't need a crisis, hopefully, for them to start acting.
Sorry, one more question for you. So at this point, would you say that you feel optimistic or pessimistic about that future?
I'm optimistic because like in the absence of the federal government doing anything, like I am working on the data privacy policies and the kids code and things and collaborating with other states and just even having conversations. Everyone is doing the best they can to protect people. And really, I would say more proactively having conversations from the start in a way that like I've never seen that before, and it's really encouraging.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and your work on this important legislation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.